Well, thank you so much, everyone. Welcome back to folks that are returning, and welcome to those that are just joining us for the first time. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Uchechukwu Onwa, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm the National Civic Engagement Coordinator with the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, BAJI. Um, BAJI fight for the right of Black migrants and African Americans through organizing, legal advocacy, research, policy, and narrative building. Our work is rooted in advancing racial justice and migrant rights to improve the condition of Black communities everywhere. I am truly honored to moderate today's conversation alongside my brilliant colleagues. I'm grateful to work with and build community alongside. Today's discussion is on Beyond the Ballot, understanding voter suppression and voter expansion. This conversation invites us to reflect on an important truth that democracy is strongest when everyone has both the opportunity and the ability to participate. But throughout the history of the United States of America, there have been efforts that have limited participation for Black communities and other historically marginalized groups, while there have been movements that have expanded access, protected voting rights, and strengthened our democracy. While voting remains one of the most visible forms of civic participation, democracy extends far beyond election day. Civic engagement is also about educating our communities, understanding the policies and systems that shape our lives, organizing around issues that matter, and ensuring that every community has meaningful opportunities to participate in the democratic process. During today's conversation, we would explore both sides of the history of the story, how barriers to participation continue to affect Black communities, and how organizers, advocates, and communities are working to expand access, strengthen civic participation, and build a more inclusive democracy. We are going to also examine the challenges, celebrate the progress that has been made, and discuss the role that each of us can play in helping our communities become informed, engaged, and empowered. We are grateful that you are here with us today, and we are looking forward to a thoughtful and engaging conversation. So now I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves by sharing their names, um, their pronouns, and what location they are. We are going to start with Mildred.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mildred Pierre Dennis Taylor. I am a Civic Engagement Associate at BAJI. I am located in Atlanta, Georgia. My pronouns is she, her. Welcome.
Thank you, Mildred. I'll popcorn it to Mark.
Yes, greetings, peace and blessings, everyone. It's always been a pleasure to be in spaces with everyone. My name is Mark G. Noel. I currently serve as the Civic Engagement Associates down in South Florida throughout the Tri-County of Dade, Broward, and throughout the regional upper north of Florida. Happy to be in the space and welcome them, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Let us go to Bonnie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Bonnie Okot. My pronouns are she, her, and I am based here in Houston, Texas. And I'm happy to be here. I am the Houston organizer for BAJI, and happy to be here with all of you so that we can continue this very much needed conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone. A note to our audience, please use the Q&A section to put your questions during the conversation. I see someone raise hand. Please, if you have a question, use the chat or use the Q&A section. We're going to respond to all of the questions later. during the Q&A section. Thanks again to the panelists for those introductions, and thank you for the work that each of you continue to do to build civic power in your respective communities. As we begin today's conversation, I want to start with a reminder that democracy is not static. It has always been shaped by the people who participate in it and those who have fought to expand access to it. Throughout the US history, democracy has been both expanded and restricted. There have been moments when more people gained access to political participation, and there have also been moments when new barriers emerged. Understanding both sides of that history helps us to better understand the work we are called to do today. So I'd like to begin by grounding us in what you are all seeing in your communities. So the first question is to all of the panelists. To start us off, what does the current voting and civic engagement landscape look like in your city or state? And what are you seeing on the ground as we prepare for the upcoming election cycle? We could start with Bonnie.
Thank you, Uche. We cannot talk about Houston without talking about the recent brutal killing of one of our community members, Lorenzo Salgado, which happened on Tuesday. The atmosphere right now is currently very tense due to his death, and there's a lot of protests going around. However, it is important for us to remember that these harmful patterns in which our government is brutalizing and traumatizing our communities have persisted for decades. It's just not this time. It's been going on for a long time. We have the mayor and elected officials who have ignored the recent attacks and the killings in Houston. And this so just happens to be one of the primary election years. So now many of them, when the killing initially happened, they were movement, they were not talking, but right now they're backtracking on their statements and inviting us to have discussions, and they're standing us with us protesters at the same time. With that being said, this year I'm in the Harris County. It did experience a historic voter turnout in the March primaries, which was recorded as one of the largest turnouts in history. And then in the primaries in May, we also saw a huge turnout during the early voting session. This is mainly driven because of the local and the national battles, which includes the district of the Congressional District 18, which was left vacant following the death of one of the congressional member. Our main concern is not that we have the registered voters, but is for those who are registered but do not come out to cast their votes. So as organizers, what we are doing, we're trying to turn the registration of the voters into representation, because it's one thing to have people register, but are they actually going to the ballot? Another concern we are having is the redistricting. And when this happens, the communities which are normally together are now separated, and it brings down our organizing power. So most organizers are now shifting their focus from the voter registration to mobilizing, doing the education, and also building collective power. There's also a lot of push towards to intensify that people come out and vote, especially in the marginalized areas.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for sharing those and letting us understand what's happening, and sending and standing in solidarity with folks in Houston over the recent killing of a community member. So we see this happen everywhere. Even here in Georgia, recently lost a life, which I think Mildred probably will speak a little bit about that. So thank you so much for bringing that up in the space. So we're gonna move on to Mildred for the same question. What are you currently seeing, in Georgia?
Thank you for that. And thank you for that information, Bonnie. And rest in peace, Lorenzo and all the families impacted by ICE and detention, and I go on and on that. But here in Atlanta and across Georgia, we're operating in a highly contested political climate, where voter access and voter suppression are happening simultaneously. There's a strong civic energy, but also systemic barriers are rooted in history, from the legacy of voter taxes and grandfathering laws to modern tactics like redistricting and ID policies and aggressive voter roll purges. Um, as for me, I got married last year, but I didn't change my name on my ID as of yet, just so I could be able to cast a vote during the primaries, because I didn't want to run the gamut. I didn't want to experiment. I didn't want to be the one where I can't vote because my last name doesn't match my birth certificate. And so you see, things like this in Atlanta and across Georgia. Another thing is there are aggressive voter poll purges on the ground in communities, especially in the Black communities, and Black migrants are determined but cautious, right? There's a motivation to vote, but it's also skepticism due to ongoing redistricting efforts, including special session that was called to withdraw the maps. Our governor tried to redraw 5 large counties in Georgia, majority Democratic counties. And so in June, we protest, we rallied, we was outside. And the first day of session, which was a session that the governor called, so it was a special session, they decided not to vote for redistricting. So yes, we have a win there, but who's to say they can try to redistrict again later? So we're still fighting for that. And so people again are most concerned about economic stability, healthcare, access, immigration protection, for even like the World Cup came here in Atlanta, and we had to fight for that to make sure that they don't allow ICE to arrest people while they're visiting here for the World Cup, which is wild. And we were able to get our mayor to say no, he would not allow ICE in our city. So we're seeing an increased, engagement among Black migrants in Atlanta, but language access and trust building remain crucial. Are there, language in Haitian Creole for voters here in Atlanta? Are there other language translated for other people that speak other languages where English is not their first language? And then so, especially for communities navigating voting and systems for the first time, overall the landscape, reflects both resistance, resilience, deeply shaped by Georgia's history, including events like the, 1906 race massacre, which people don't like to talk about, which still, informs how communities understand the political power and disenfranchisement today.
Thank you, Mildred. Thank you so much for giving us that context of what's happening here in Georgia. So let us now shift to Miami, Florida, to understand what is happening, the current political climate in Miami. Mark?
Yes, Uche. Thank you for this particular question. For us in South Florida, I would generally say that us as a state and us as Floridian, we are entering in this election cycle and hoping for a political change in the environment, right? So there's been we had like a state of government that is basically introduced legislation that really did not serve the public. So the state itself And as we speak based off the subject, the states itself has seen a significant change to election administration and election laws within the recent years. While we are organizers and advocates of change, we know there will continuously to be legislation that continue to shape how people registered and participate in election. But at the same time, members of Florida, communities of Florida, organizers of Florida is also preparing for a major statewide race in a way that we would call it very pivotal. It's a very pivotal election cycle. We have people running for governor, from state house seats to senators and local representatives, and even to school board members on a local level, and even other spaces of government, right? But if I had to answer the question fully and authentically, I would say, besides the political climax of what's happening around South Florida, is what is on the ground, right? Which is what we mostly concern of. So the concern of what us as activists and members of communities been hearing the most from members of our community is it's not always about who's running for office, but it's about the concern of feeling safety, feeling informed, and also being empowered enough to even participate in to cast a vote. So I organize in a community that has a lot of Black migrants, Haitians, Jamaicans, people throughout the Caribbeans, even members of the African diaspora, and we can't forget about the people who's been leading this civil right movement, which is our African brothers and sisters, in which we have to give gratitude and appreciation to, right? So from their concern is that like people are worried about immigration policies, economic instabilities, housing affordabilities, healthcare, public safety, which is part top of the priority. And once you go out, when you canvass and we have conversation with people, they do care about the election cycle. They do want to participate, but um, um, first and foremost, even for me as an organizer and speaking to the members of the community, the first thing that they want to build conversation with you is the issues that they are facing. And so, as we organize, we mobilize and educate members of our community to bring their concern to elected officials. So, and then from hearing part of the things that they mentioned, our strategies as organizers is always to build relationship building. So we have a strategy of staying focused on a year-round organizing effort, not just doing election season. Um, as far as like what we doing throughout the ground, we do political education. We continuously to do the Know Your Rights training, and we continuously to have build conversation with community members, and also develop leadership. And then part of doing that is the ability for communities to find trust in the work that you are doing. So we are building trust. And the way that we build trust also increase the participation of voters' engagement. I guess those are some of the concern and some of the criterias that is going as far as like this election cycle throughout South Florida. Sorry for the rambling.
Thank you so much. No, Mark, really appreciate all of that. And thank you so much to all of you for sharing about what's happening in your city. I think one thing that I'm kind of hearing is that um, while every state has its own political landscape, communities are navigating many of the same questions around participation, trust, which Mark brought in terms of how you guys are building trust, access, and also representation, and even fear. So one thing that I appreciate also, which Mark you talked about BAJI, is that um, we don't just prepare people for election day. We help communities to understand why local elections matters and how they impact everyday issues like education, housing, healthcare, public safety, immigration, and everything that you did mention. Um, the one thing that also is important to remember is that voting rights in this country has never been automatic for Black people in this country. Black people fought for voting right, and we continue to fight even in 2026. Every major expansion of democracy came because people organized and demanded change. After the Civil War, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which established citizenship and equal protection under the law, and then the 15th Amendment that prohibited denying men the right to vote based on race. But also, while it established that constitutional protection, many Black Americans were still prevented from voting through discriminatory state laws and practices for generations after all. So later victories included the 19th Amendment, which expanded voting rights to women, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the protection of language access and voters with disabilities. So democracy has always expanded because our communities fought and continue to fight, especially Black communities. We organized, we resisted, and we fought to make, those inclusion. So with that, we're going to transition to the next question, which is which is for Mark, unfortunately, because I know you just spoke, but the next question is also, for you, Mark. So when we hear the phrase voter suppression, sometimes people often think about long lines of voter ID laws. So from your perspective, what does voter suppression look like in your community today?
To answer your question, I would say for me when people hear the phrase voter suppression, as you also mentioned, I think they often think of the long line at the polls or the voters ID laws, and things like that. But to me, um, voter suppression is not always about someone being turned away at the poll. Sometimes it is the accumulate of administration barriers, the confusing laws, the missed deadline, signatures issues, or the lack of information or whatnot, right? That can make it harder for eligible voters to successfully cast a vote. Um, um, and that's why it is truly important for us to do this voters education and build trust amongst community throughout this outreach engagement is critical and it's so important, and I will continuously to emphasize. But to get deep and to answer the question directly to me directly. So to me directly, when I hear voter suppression, and for me down here in South Florida, the way that I see voter suppression and happening is exactly what I said through the frequent rules change that continuously to create confusion. So for us in South Florida, Florida has like several aspects of its vote by mail system in which they changed throughout recent years that continuously to require voters to stay informed about deadline, the procedures of how to participate in a system as such as vote by mail, right? So so and then vote by mail itself is a system that get expired. So under Florida current law, voters must periodically submit like a new request for vote by mail ballot. Um, most people, most people oftentimes think that, and they assume that if they already request a ballot, that it will continuously to be given to them. But in the current laws, in the current change of how this particular um, vote by mail initiative is going, that a voter has to continuously to submit a request every time an election cycle ends. So, and then the part of the suppression about that is that if people do not realize that their previous request has expired, then head into the next election season, they might not receive a mail-in ballot, which in a way suppress people's voting for not having the accurate information. And it's also the thing about in which the state of Florida does this thing on signature matching that could create a barrier. So election officials compare signatures on a mail ballot to a certificate with the signature that is placed on file. So imagine, right, a person that that's going through of age or that is going through like health issues. Sometimes their signature might not like directly represent the same way as you just naturally sign it. You understand? So, so that itself could raise a flag. And and I do believe South Florida does provide a process for voters to cure and also fix signature issues before the deadline of election. But also the problem is that there's a limited awareness of that cure deadline. Some voters do not know that they need to respond very quickly if their signature has an issue, which could also result in otherwise a valid ballot not being counted. So to me, that is a voter suppression. So from what I mentioned, people who's going through health issues, um, problem with their hand in which they can't even sign the way that they sign at the age that they did sign that official certificate, and then they doing at an older age where their hands are shaking if it's not matching to the exact T of what they have on file, then they flag it. They be like, oh, that's not them. So that is very much voter suppression in ways that disencourage people from voting. And then again, speaking about voters suppression, I think it also looked like misinformation, false information about voters eligibility, election dates, polling location being changed. And as we said, voting requirement continuously to change in ways that people are, they want things to be, we live in a society in which members of a society would want things to be easier for them, and they want things to be like popcorn flavor, easy and simple. So the more that we continuously to change laws and regulation about how people vote, it continuously to emphasize ways for members of our communities to be suppressed in ways to vote. And I also will emphasize access to accurate information is definitely essential. I think community members need to be clear on timely information. Sometimes it's not always provided in an accurate times when people need the information for them to do what they do, to register early, to vote early. Those information is not always there unless there's an organization that is actively doing the work. And then past and prior in past election, I have noticed that especially on the polling location, where people who been voting in polling places and pissing places for over 5 years or whole decades to the point that they themselves goes into that same place, and that they tell them that they no longer could vote in that particular space. So that, for me, that is voters expression to disencourage members of our community, to drag them further and to push them further to see how long they would go to cast a vote. So to me, that is voter suppression. And luckily, I work for an organization, and I also have partnership with many of organizations that continuously to provide transportation, um, accessibility to people. So, as I mentioned, like past election, I flag at least 10 to 20 people who've been turned away from polling places, and wish that our organization had to provide transportation to them to get them in the right places for them to cast their vote. So for me, in a way, those are ways that I see how voter suppression looks like, without sending the water hose, and as they did back in the days, to our ancestors. So now the rules has changed, the game has changed, and there's different mechanism to it. So those are the ways that I see voter suppression around my community.
Thank you so much, Mark. I think all those, suppressions that you shared and also defied also on the work that, you guys have been doing as well to combat it. I think one thing, biggest takeaway for me is that voter suppression can take many forms. Sometimes it is obvious and sometimes it is much more in a subtle way. And it can also be misinformation, polling place closures, language barriers, inaccessible polling locations. Those can and also reduce early voting opportunities, and even confusion around registration, or simply creating enough obstacle that participating feels overwhelming. I think it is also important to note that historically voter suppression has, changed over time. Because after the 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments, many southern states used literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clause, and intimidation to prevent Black Americans from voting. Many of those practices were eventually outlawed, but new challenges continue to emerge. Today's conversation has evolved. We also continue to see debates over voter access, which often include issues such as polling place closure, changes to voting procedures, and even gerrymandering, which is the practice of drawing electoral district boundaries in ways that can influence political representation and reduce the voting power of certain communities. We also continue to see redistricting disputes in several southern states, as the three of you had mentioned, where counties, legislatures, and communities have debated whether new district map provide fair representation, particularly for Black voters. This ongoing discussion reminds us that protecting and strengthening democracy requires continual attention, public engagement, and accountability. I also want us to know that today's conversation isn't only about barriers, it is also about possibilities, because throughout histories, every effort to suppress participation has been met by people organizing and expanding. And it would be good that as we are talking about the challenges to suppress voters, we also need to recognize the wins and the effort that has been made to expand voters as well. So, Mildred, this question is for you. This webinar, as I mentioned, isn't just about voter suppression. It is also about expanding democracy. What does expanding democracy look like in your region, and what efforts are helping more people participate?
Thank you. And great job, Mark, even though you had to go back to back. Appreciate you. Expanding democracy in Atlanta looks like meeting people where they are and removing barriers that have historically excluded them. We just here Atlanta's funny. I think in May, it was May, it was in June. May, our governor signed into law HB 369, which allows which will allow ballots now to not have, it won't say if they're Democrat, if the candidate is Democrat or Republican. So that will no longer be on the ballot. This is a big issue because you know, usually if you're not literate in the politic world, if it says Democrat, then that's usually who you vote for. This is a huge barrier, and what we're seeing now in my community in Atlanta is organizations coming together to strike that down. They're going to the governor and looking to reverse it with another bill. Another thing we're seeing here is communities coming together, coalition building. It's we recognize it's going to take more than just one or two individuals. It's going to take organizations coming together to cast down these ideas that will disproportionately affect Black communities. Another thing we notice is that these barriers do exclude us. And this includes culturally competent voter education in the Black and migrant communities, increasing language, like I said earlier. And another thing is it means to build strong coalition across movements. And it's not just one organization has more than the other. It's coming together and making this thing work, putting our hands to the plow. And it's also expanding democracy here is not just about voting. It's about shifting power, ensuring historically marginalized communities in Atlanta are informed, represented, and resourced. Democracy looks like us working together for a common goal. It means us recognizing these laws are not working for us and are working against us. And we're fighting together. We're going to the Capitol. We're marching, we protest, and we're saying that this is not working for our Black community. It's not working for our migrant community. This is causing a bigger issue, but it's us fighting against those things that are fighting against us. And recently, and I want to just throw this out here. I know this is a little curveball. Recently, we just had someone die at a detention center, one of the detention centers here in Georgia. And democracy looks like organizations from all different backgrounds coming together and saying, this is not right. Let's shut down these detention centers so that no one can be caged. But again, it's the coming together as a democracy and saying that we're not gonna let them win. We're not gonna let them just get away with it. It's us looking at these different laws, different bills that are set up for us to fail.
Thank you so much, Mildred. And again, sending love and to those to the lives that we have lost, and the one you just mentioned that we lost early this week at Owen Detention Center. So horrible that this week alone we've lost like many lives due to this system. I also really do appreciate all of the examples that you named, Mildred, and also letting us know that expanding democracy isn't simply increasing voter turnout. It's making participation more accessible and ensuring that people have accurate information, developing community leadership, and creating opportunities for more voices to be heard. I also wanted to bring a little bit of historical context. That one of my favorite thing that I love about civic engagement is realizing that democracy has continually expanded because ordinary people have organized. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 became one of the most important civil rights laws in the country's history because it prohibited many discriminatory voting practices that had kept Black communities from participating fully. Years later, the National Voter Registration Act expanded registration opportunities by allowing people to register through the DMV and other public agencies. We have also seen efforts to expand language access and improve accessibility for voters with disabilities. All those victories remind, and even the current victories remind us that democracy expands because communities continue to organize for greater inclusion. And that connects directly to BAJI's philosophy around civic engagement. So this next question is to Bonnie. At BAJI, we believe that civic engagement doesn't begin or end at the ballot box. How does your work help communities stay engaged before, during, and after election?
Thank you. Thank you, Uche. Thank you, Mildred and Mark. Always very engaging and great information. My approach and the approach of many other organizers is to ensure we have sustained civic engagement with our communities. Especially when it comes to, we prioritize the educational workshops. Why I say this is because statistically, it's like here in Houston, in Harris County, the number of people registered to vote was in Harris County, where I am, is 2.6 million. Yet those who turned out to vote was 1.5 million only. So you can see the people, we are pushing them to go and register, but they are not going to do the actual voting. And that's why the voter education is so important for them to understand that without their voices, we're not going to be able to change policies. So before the elections, we center on teaching them about the voting guidelines. We center on reminding them about the upcoming elections. We remind them on who's on the ballot and who is for what policies and what policies will harm us and why we should vote. We educate them on the policies of the different candidates that are there. We also ensure that they are registered, their details are in order, so that they don't get to the polling station and then they are told, no, this is not your name, and they have that issue. So that's what we do before. And during the election, we ensure they have accessibility. We ensure there is also visibility. We try and partner with other organizations to do what we call roll to the polls, so that we can take people. We remind them. We give them rights to the poll, so that they don't have an excuse to say that they did not that they had no transport to go to the polls. And then we also partner with other coalitions to ensure that everybody knows what policies the different candidates have. And we all must commit to this deep collaboration. And then we also do a lot of passing out of the voter materials to different people, so that they know how to vote, because not everybody is privy to how they need to vote. So people will say, look at it like this is an issue. I don't want to bother myself. But when they have the material, when they are knowledgeable, it makes everything easy. After the elections, that's when we come in with our town halls. We come in with the people who have been elected. We hold them accountable. We make sure we meet them. We do the town halls to address the issues that are already happening, so that the people who have been elected can work on this, on what the promises they had made.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I really do appreciate and love the accountabilities part that you brought into the table, because I think that's one thing that we don't talk about a lot, is like, how we're holding folks accountable when we elect them into office. So to make sure that they are, working for us, because we put them in office. So I do appreciate that. Because elections are moments that organizing is continuous. Our work doesn't just stop after votes are counted. We have to continue to organize, continue to educate, and continue to advocate, and continue again to hold decision makers accountable throughout the years. And that is how community build long-term power, rather than only responding every election cycle. We unfortunately don't have a lot of time, so we're going to do the one last question, because we are running out of time, and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So the last question is to all of you. So as we prepare for the upcoming election, what gives you hope? Where do you see opportunities to strengthen democracy and increase civic participation?
Yeah, Uche, as far as hope, I would mention that the trust building factor, leading in towards coalitions to um to lead into coalitions and members and allies of our communities to continuously to pick up this work and do this work amongst us and not just organization isolation. So my hope within for us to do this work is like really building coalition building that allows us to share resources, expand, which would expand our reach and also ensures culturally relevant outreach. So yeah, so I think first and foremost is building relationship amongst community and also extending that gratitude in that line of work amongst communities, allies, and coalitions to be partnered with us amongst us to do this work. And then after that, we have to continuously to we have to continuously to do this work year round, not just like knock on somebody's door to be like, yo, there's an election. We have to continuously to be intentional about how we do this work. And we have to be intentionally of how we speak to members of our community. So it is one thing for us as organizers and civic engagement people to say that we do this work, but we cannot say that we do the work for the community. We have to actually do the work along the side of community, because once we step outside thinking that the work that we are doing is a charitable aspect, then we are removing ourselves from the situation, the impact, and we're not working side to side with community. We are only doing the work as far as like we are the person with the hat, the person that's making the decision. So very much um the hope is for myself, for organizers, coalitions, group to understand that very, very, very real, to be very intentional amongst how they do that work. Um, Not just of like educating people, because it is one thing to speak people like a professor may speak to students, but we have to speak to members of our communities as if we are relatable to the same experience that they are facing. And then along the side that from explaining the thing that they do not understand, then and if we are have expertise, or and if we don't have expertise to answer some of the questions that they have, we reach out to one of our coalition partners. We reach out to our policy people. We reach out to our legal people to not only educate us as organizers who's doing this work, but educate members of our community, and not in the ways in which I emphasize, in the ways that you just like sharing information and putting information in to people and forcing them to get the information, but in a way that we are all relatable, we are all impacted by the same policies, and we have compassion and grace for one another. For me, that is the hope that I see for the future. And then as far as election wise, continuously to be informed, find out like whoever you are choosing to vote for, um, hold them accountable, ask them directly. And when I say accountable, go to their office, go to these town halls, go to these town halls conversation and talk to them directly to be like, what do you really have in mind for my community, and how are you going to get that to pass, or how are you going to bring that into a ways of that would be in a bill or in a legislation figure. So my hope is for all
Thank you
members
so
of our
much, Mark. I'm
community.
going to cut you.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut you because we don't have a lot of time. We have about 5 minutes to end. And unfortunately, Bonnie, I will not be able to get to you for that particular question. I think what I'm going to do is open up the Q&A. So we're going to take about the next 2-3 minutes to respond to some of the questions. The first question is, have you seen any local policies in your area that have significantly improved voting access or voter turnout and could be replicated elsewhere? Thank you to the panelists. Would any of you want to respond to that question? Has there been any local policies in your area that have significantly improved voter access or voter turnout, which could be replicated elsewhere?
Uh, I wouldn't say policies, but what I would say is the pressure of what is going on and what is happening right now, especially with the recent killings and everything. There definitely is a lot of turnout in when people are coming together to protest, and we are putting a lot of pressure, especially like the of recently the different council meetings that we have been attending as BAJI. We have seen how putting pressure on them is making them shift. It may be, we are not sure if it is for real, but they are definitely putting a shift and giving us a space to talk and air out our concerns. So for me, that the pressure that we are putting on them and the more turnout that we are having, the diverse nature of the people turning out, there's people of all the blacks, everybody's turning up. And if we continue pushing this, then definitely we're going to see a shift in change, because that's the only way that if that we will have a change when all our voices are put together.
And then the last question is, does turnover of people moving due to lack of affordable housing affect your work?
Yeah, I will just comment on it briefly, Uche. Like I said, I think for us, being organizers, we are also affected by the same policies that happen in our community. So very much, there's different projects that happen around my communities in which we label them as gentrification, that remove a lot of the significant folks that we used to work with, in which they move to other areas of our roadmap, in which that we no longer have access to them. But in the ways of your question is to say that because of because we don't have the access to affordable housing, there's a lot of people that we used to do work with that had to move or was pushed out from the community in which they was organizing from.
Thank you, Mark. We are already at time and there's no other question. So we're going to wrap it up. As we close today's discussion on Beyond the Ballot, understanding voter suppression and expanding democracy, we are reminded that democracy is not something that we participate in once every few years. It is something that we build and strengthen every day. Today's conversation highlighted that while barriers to participation continue to exist, so do countless efforts to expand access, protecting voting rights, and ensuring that every community has a voice. We heard that democracy grows stronger when people are informed, engaged, and empowered to participate not only on the ballot box, but in their neighborhood, schools, workplace, and communities. We also reaffirmed that civic engagement is more than voting. It is organizing, it is educating, advocating, building relationships, building institutions accountable, holding institutions accountable, and creating opportunities for communities to shape the decisions that affect their lives. Whether we are registering new voters, hosting political education workshop, organizing around local issues, or building long-term leadership, each of these actions strengthen our democracy. As we move closer to election season, let today's conversation serve as a reminder that every conversation, every act of organizing, and the effort to engage our communities matters. Expanding democracy is not a responsibility that one person would carry or one organization. It is a collective effort that requires all of us. Thank you again to our incredible panelists. for sharing your expertise, your experiences, insight, and leadership. And thank you, everyone who joined us today. We apologize that we are 1 minute late, and we hope that you leave this conversation today with a deeper understanding of both the challenges and opportunities before us, and with renewed commitment to building communities that are informed, engaged, and empowered. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you on our next event and the next civic engagement webinar next month. This time, we hope that you enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy your weekend as well. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.